They looked me in the eye for years and smiled, while hollowing out pieces of me they had no intention of returning. I handed them my time, my savings, my quiet loyalty, and they repaid it with silence when it mattered most. No shouting, no slammed doors, just a message. Cold, final. It didn't end with that message, though. That was just the moment the rope stopped burning and the fall began. Everything after was slow, sharp, deliberate, a revelation in pieces. This isn't a story of revenge. It's what happens when a man stops asking to be seen and starts choosing what he'll no longer carry. If you felt the sting of being quietly cut out of life you helped build, this story may echo too closely. Tap like, hit subscribe, and share where you're watching from. And tell me in the comments, when did your turning point begin? There's a kind of silence that lives in a house the night before a big trip. A peaceful hum of anticipation where every detail has been checked twice and all that remains is the thrill of departure. That's where I was. My suitcase lay open on the bed, half filled with carefully chosen outfits for different European cities. Light layers for Rome, a soft cardigan for Parisian evenings, and my favorite blue cotton shirt that I'd imagined wearing to dinner on our first night near the Eiffel Tower. The itinerary I'd printed and highlighted sat on the nightstand, along with our flight tickets and my passport. Everything had been mapped out with care: walking tours, museum tickets, train transfers, even emergency contacts. I had checked the forecast earlier: sunny skies in Paris, mild temperatures in Venice. I was humming an old Sinatra tune when my phone buzzed beside me. I expected a reminder from Haley, maybe something light like, "Don't forget your charger," or "Meet us at Terminal C." But what I read knocked the breath out of me. "Dad, you're not coming. Ethan thinks this trip should be just family." I read it once, then again. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the message a third time, the words swimming on the screen. My thumb hovered over the phone as if waiting might change the meaning. Just family? I'm her father. I'm the one who paid for the flights, the hotels, the tours. I'm the one who researched every detail late into the night while she was busy juggling work calls or tending to Ethan's never-ending needs. I'm the one who pitched the idea for this trip in the first place, to build memories with my daughter before I got too old to enjoy them. And now, just like that, I was out. Not even a phone call, just a text. I stare at the suitcase. My shoes, my guidebooks, my travel-sized toiletries lined up like soldiers waiting for orders that would never come. I slowly zipped the suitcase shut. The click of the latches echoed through the quiet room, like the sound of a verdict being handed down. I didn't even cry. Not then. I was too stunned, too humiliated. I placed the blue shirt back in the closet, its fabric limp in my hand, no longer a token of Parisian elegance, but a reminder of exclusion. I opened the airline app and canceled my ticket. The customer service agent was professional and kind. "I'm sorry to hear your plans changed, Mr. Ellis." She had no idea. How could she? After I hung up, I just sat there, surrounded by brochures and maps I no longer needed. My heart didn't break all at once. It cracked quietly, like frost spreading across a window pane. I walked through the house slowly, each room whispering echoes of a trip that would never be. The living room still held the travel books I had borrowed from the library. The dining table was where I had laid out options for flights and routes and asked for Haley's preferences, which she barely skimmed. I poured myself a glass of water, but the taste felt flat. I left it on the counter. When I sat on the couch and picked up my phone again, my hand trembled. I scrolled through photos from Haley's childhood, the zoo trip when she was 5, her high school graduation, our first father-daughter road trip to the Grand Canyon. Instead, I sat at the edge of my bed, letting the silence surround me. I picked up the plane ticket from the nightstand, stared at the words Charles de Gaulle, and felt a sting behind my eyes. I had imagined this so many times, Haley and me sitting side by side on the flight, laughing about the tiny plastic meals, taking photos from the plane window as we soared over the Atlantic. Now the ticket felt like a joke, a cruel reminder of plans made by someone who believed he belonged. I tossed it into the wastebasket without looking. I moved slowly through the motions of the morning, pouring cereal I didn't eat, making coffee I didn't drink. I couldn't stop checking my phone, even though I knew there would be no messages. A part of me still hoped Haley would text again, say she regretted what happened, say she'd made a mistake. But there was nothing, not even a message to check if I was okay. The silence screamed louder than any apology ever could. I wandered into my office, a room I usually avoided because it reminded me too much of the years I spent working long hours to support Haley. There were pictures on the wall, her high school graduation, the trip to Yellowstone, her wedding. In each one, I was smiling. I looked happy. I had been happy, or at least I thought I was. But now, those moments felt distant, like they belonged to someone else entirely. I sat at my desk, pulled out a folder labeled Vacation Plans, and opened it slowly. Inside were printed confirmations for hotels in Paris, Rome, and Florence, each one carefully booked to give us the best views, the most authentic experiences. I remembered spending hours comparing options, reading reviews, even calling hotels to ask about accessibility, knowing my knees weren't what they used to be. I thought I was being thoughtful. I thought I was making it perfect. I didn't realize I was doing it all for people who never intended to include me. I pulled out the restaurant list next, my own handwritten notes beside each name. Good for sunset dinner. Haley loves duck. Must try. It broke me. I crumpled the paper in my fist before tossing it across the room. I got up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I couldn't sit still anymore. I had to get out. I grabbed my keys and left the house, not sure where I was going. The neighborhood looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. I passed by Mrs. Gallagher's front yard, where she was watering her roses. She waved cheerfully, unaware that my world had shifted overnight. I forced a smile and waved back. I ended up at the park where Haley used to play as a kid. The swings creaked in a breeze, the slide glistened from the morning dew, and I sat on the bench near the sandbox where she once built castles for hours, her face lit with joy every time I clapped like she'd won an award. That little girl, the one who held my hand and said I was her hero, was nowhere in that text she sent. I didn't know who this new version of her was, this woman who could cut me off with the ease of flipping a light switch. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone again, and opened Facebook without thinking. And there they were. More photos. Ethan's parents in front of a cafe in Montmartre. Haley smiling with a croissant in hand. The Eiffel Tower in the background. The caption read, "So grateful for this family adventure." My throat tightened. Grateful? I closed the app and gripped the phone until my knuckles turned white. Then I noticed a notification from my banking app. It showed a recent charge, Le Jardin d'Hiver, Paris. The timestamp was 15 minutes ago. They were having lunch, and they were using my money. The card I gave Haley for emergencies, the one I had never revoked because I trusted her, was now funding the vacation I was uninvited from. I stared at the charge in disbelief. It felt like salt rubbed into an already gaping wound. I stood up, pocketed the phone, and walked back home, the decision forming in my chest with every step. I had been quiet for too long, too generous, too trusting. Something needed to change. When I got home, I walked straight to my office, opened my laptop, and stared at the bank dashboard. Haley's name stared back at me under authorized users. I had gone the entire day without hearing another word from Haley, not even a simple follow-up to check if I'd gotten the message, not a single text to ask how I was doing or offer some lukewarm explanation for why I had been cast aside. That silence spoke louder than anything she could have said, and yet, like a man waiting for a train that wasn't coming, I kept checking my phone hoping for something. Anything. that might make sense of the senseless. The walls of the house felt tighter somehow, the rooms filled not with warmth, but with echoes of conversations that had meant something once, with memories I no longer trusted. I found myself standing in the hallway outside the guest room, staring at the framed photo from Haley's wedding, the one where I'm walking her down the aisle with tears in my eyes and pride written all over my face. At the time, I had believed that was one of the greatest honors of my life. Now I wasn't sure what it had meant to her. Maybe I had simply been a placeholder, a prop for the day, just like I had been in her life ever since Ethan entered the picture. I returned to the living room and sank into my recliner, switching on the TV for background noise, some local news broadcast murmuring about city council budgets and school board elections, none of it able to hold my attention. My thoughts kept drifting back to Paris. I wonder where they were right now. Were they at the Louvre, admiring the Mona Lisa while Ethan's mother asked loud tourist questions and the security guard rolled his eyes? Were they sitting in a little cafe in the Marais, ordering duck confit and sipping Bordeaux, laughing about something I would never hear? I opened my phone and tapped into Facebook, the habit already too familiar. The page loaded slowly, the spinning circle taunting me before it finally revealed what I was dreading. A new post. Haley's name at the top. The photo hit me like a punch to the chest. There she was, my daughter, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, arm in arm with Ethan, and flanked on either side by his parents. All four of them beaming, the kind of vacation smile that only comes when you've forgotten about the rest of the world. The caption beneath it read, "First day of our amazing family vacation. So lucky to be surrounded by love and laughter in Paris." I counted the faces. 1, 2, 3, 4. No acknowledgement that I had ever been part of the plan. That photo made it real. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't temporary. It was intentional. I wasn't invited because I wasn't part of what she now called family. I stared at the image for a long time, too long, until my vision blurred. My fingers hovered over the like button out of some foolish instinct, but I stopped myself. I closed the app and opened it again. The photo was still there, still smiling, still pretending I didn't exist. I set the phone face down on the table and sat back, my heart pounding in my ears. A storm was rising inside me, slow and cold and quiet. I wasn't angry in the way people throw things or yell or slam doors. This was deeper. This was betrayal soaked in clarity. They were using my money, living out the dream I had designed, while I sat alone in the home I had nearly mortgaged to help them stay afloat. And it wasn't just the vacation. That picture was a symbol, a final confirmation of something I had started to suspect over the years, but had never wanted to admit. I wasn't loved. I was useful. I was the ATM, the safety net, the guy who fixed things, paid for things, and stayed conveniently in the background until needed. I had mistaken being needed for being valued. I got up and walked to my office, turned on a lamp, and opened my file drawer. I pulled out the folder marked Mortgage, Maple Street. It contained every document from the purchase of Haley and Ethan's house. Deed, loan agreements, property tax statements, all of it with my name listed as primary owner because the bank wouldn't approve them on their own. They had promised to take care of the transfer paperwork once they got settled. That was 2 years ago. I set the folder on the desk and sat down in front of it, staring at the documents like they were pieces of a puzzle I had ignored for too long. My eyes moved from line to line, reliving the conversation where I assured them it was fine, that I trusted them, that they'd get to it eventually. Now I saw it differently. Now I saw the pattern. I opened my banking app again. There it was. Another charge. Boutique chic Paris. 85 euros. Shoes maybe. Or a handbag. I refreshed the screen. Yet another transaction appeared. Hotel Monceau lunch. 46 euros. I stood up so fast the chair nearly tipped over behind me. My breathing had changed. My pulse was faster. I wasn't going to wait anymore. I wasn't going to sit in this house like some forgotten relic while they used my resources to enjoy a fantasy they had denied me. I picked up the phone and opened the car management menu in the app, my thumb hovering over the Manage Authorized Users section. Parisian boutiques, meals, metro passes, and gelato shops. I'd stayed quiet, hovering in the background like I always did, but now it wasn't out of habit. It was strategy. I didn't want to act out of emotion, because emotion had always been used against me. That morning, though, something snapped. Maybe it was the notification of another designer purchase, or maybe it was the way the sunlight had broken through the blinds and illuminated the Maple Street deed still resting on my desk. I picked up my phone and stared at Haley's contact. Her name looked foreign on the screen, like it belonged to a stranger. I pressed call before I could second-guess myself. The phone rang 3 times before she answered, her voice chipper and breezy. "Hi, Dad." I could hear traffic in the background and distant chatter, probably a Paris cafe buzzing with tourists. "I need to understand something," I said, skipping any polite introduction. There was a pause, and then she replied, "What's that?" Her voice had shifted, less friendly now, more cautious. "I saw the photos," I said flatly. "You told me it was just going to be a family trip, but Ethan's parents are with you." Another pause. Then her tone changed completely. Defensive. "Dad, we can explain." I waited in silence, letting the weight of the moment stretch. "Look," she said finally, "Ethan just thought it would be better this way. He didn't want the vacation to feel tense." Tense? I echoed. What exactly would have made it tense? "You could be a little overwhelming sometimes," she said, her voice tightening. "And this trip was really important to us." "I planned this trip," I reminded her, trying to keep my voice steady. "I booked the hotels, the flights, the tours. I paid for it all." "Ethan's parents paid their own way," she snapped quickly. "They don't need us to constantly take care of them." The implication was sharp and deliberate. "Constantly," I repeated, my stomach twisting. "I helped you when Ethan lost his job. I covered your bills. I co-signed on your house. I gave you the credit card you're using right now. We never asked for a guilt trip," she cut in. "We just wanted a vacation without the added stress." In the background, I could hear Ethan's voice laughing about something, probably talking to a waiter or joking with his father. The sound felt like a slap. "Honestly, Dad," she said, lowering her voice but sharpening it at the same time, "Ethan was right. You're too needy." That word landed with a cruel finality. Needy, as if years of support, sacrifice, and effort had been nothing more than a burden. I didn't reply right away. I swallowed hard, the bitterness rising in my throat. "I understand," I said finally, my voice low and deliberate. "Good," she replied quickly, like she couldn't wait to be off the call. "We'll talk when we get back." I didn't say goodbye. I simply ended the call and set the phone down on my desk like it had burned my hand. The word needy echoed in my mind, reverberating against every memory, every sacrifice, every time I'd said yes when I should have said no. I looked up at the wall at the photos of Haley and me, frozen snapshots of a bond one had believed in with my whole heart. There we were at her 5th birthday party, her graduation, her wedding day. I had been the constant in all those moments, always proud, always supportive, always present. And now I was too much, too needy. I stood slowly and walked over to the wall, reaching up to straighten one of the frames, an old habit from my contractor days. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, older, worn, tired. But beneath the fatigue, something else had started to surface. Something harder, something sharper. I turned away from the wall and returned to my desk, pulling open the drawer where I kept receipts and financial records. The numbers stared back at me like a verdict. The $80,000 I pulled from retirement to fund their down payment, the credit card bills I'd paid, the utilities I covered when Ethan was between jobs. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it represented. I sat in the dim orange hue of the setting sun, watching it slip away through the blinds like a final act of decency, leaving behind a darkness I wasn't in a hurry to escape. The word needy kept ricocheting in my skull like a bullet in a small room, and no matter how I tried to quiet it, the echo of it kept bouncing off every corner of my mind. I thought back to all the years I'd stepped up without being asked, without complaint, without hesitation. I remembered when Haley first moved out with Ethan, how they were full of big plans and empty bank accounts. I remembered quietly sending them grocery money when they were too proud to ask. I remembered covering the deductible when their car was rear-ended and they couldn't afford the repairs. And I remembered opening that joint credit card account with her name added as an authorized user, telling myself it was just temporary, just to help her build her credit until things stabilized. I remembered Ethan's half-hearted thanks and Haley's grateful hug that now felt more like performance than affection. Those memories no longer glowed, they stung. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my banking app again, almost out of habit now, but with a purpose that had started to crystallize since the call. I scrolled through the recent transactions like I was flipping through betrayal printed in black and white. There was Café du Nord, 58 euros. Musée d'Orsay tickets, 36 euros. Shopping at Galerie Lafayette, 172 euros. The hotel, charged in 2-day increments, 498 euros. And on it went. They weren't just using the card. They were living lavishly on it, guilt-free, boundary-free, without even the decency to pretend they were being careful. I clicked to expand the transaction history and saw purchases from wine bars, designer boutiques, guided tours, and even a spa. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. The total was climbing into the thousands now. The emergency card, the one meant to help her in moments of crisis, was now her passport to luxury. It wasn't about need. It was about entitlement. And that realization hit harder than anything Haley had said on the phone. She hadn't just excluded me. She had stripped me of my humanity and reduced me to a funding source. A bank that could be accessed with a smile, and now that the smile had faded, they still felt no need to stop swiping. I looked at the fine print beneath each charge, the digital trail of indulgence built with my money, and something in me shifted again. The sorrow had burned away. The confusion had cleared. What remained was sharp, focused, and precise. I stood up and walked back to the guest room, where my unused suitcase still sat. I opened it and stared at the clothes I had packed. The shirts, the shoes, the camera I bought just for this trip. None of it would be used, but none of it would go to waste either. I pulled out the camera and placed it on my desk, next to the Maple Street property file and the stack of bank statements. A part of me thought I might document this, if only for myself. The truth had to live somewhere outside my head. I sat back down and opened the card settings. I hovered over the Remove Authorized User option, Haley's name glowing back at me in sterile gray text. I didn't press it. Not yet. Not because I wasn't ready, but because I understood that removing her without context wouldn't be enough. It had to mean something. I wanted the moment to land, to resonate, to echo. I wanted her to feel the floor shift beneath her feet in real time. I wanted her to be mid-meal, mid-laugh, mid-toasting champagne with Ethan's mother. When the waiter returned, apologetic, card declined. I wanted Ethan to feel embarrassed. I wanted Haley to panic. Not out of malice, but because consequences had to return to a space where they had long since been evicted. I closed the laptop gently and folded my arms, letting the quiet wrap around me. I thought back to the day I signed that credit card agreement. I had done it with love, but love without boundaries is a trap. I had given too much, too often, and expected nothing in return except a seat at the table I had built. They had pulled that seat away and laughed as I fell. The next morning, I printed the full account history from the last 30 days. Page after page, charge after charge, black ink on white paper telling a story they thought I'd never read. I placed the pages into a folder, labeled it Fran's Final Straw, and slid it into the drawer with the Maple Street deed. One file for every slap I'd taken with a smile. I wasn't just preparing to cut them off financially. I was preparing to reclaim myself. There was no more room for hesitation. The printed pages of their Paris expenses still sat neatly stacked on my desk, evidence of indulgence, entitlement, and utter disrespect. I walked into my office, flipped on the desk lamp, and opened my laptop with a kind of calm I hadn't felt in days. The cursor blinked steadily as I navigated to the bank's card management screen. There it was, Haley's name listed under authorized users. For years, that name represented trust. Now, it symbolized something entirely different. My finger hovered for only a second. Then, without ceremony or drama, I clicked remove. A confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to remove this user? This action cannot be undone. I clicked yes. The screen refreshed. Her name disappeared. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, breathing deeply, not with relief, but with resolve. It was done. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way that reminded me of Sunday mornings long ago, before all the noise of other people's expectations took up space in my mind. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and walked to the kitchen window, watching the neighborhood slowly come alive. Across the street, Mr. Holloway was walking his dog, unaware that in this small house, a line had just been drawn. For the rest of the morning, I busied myself with chores I hadn't cared to touch in days. I watered the plants, swept the porch, even organized the pantry. But every so often, I glanced at my phone, knowing it wouldn't stay silent forever. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 4:03 p.m., the call came in. An international number. Paris. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice even, steady. Good afternoon, I said, sipping my coffee like we were just old friends catching up. Dad, what did you do to the card? Haley's voice came through sharp and frantic. No greetings, no concern, just accusation. I removed your access, I said plainly. You what? She snapped, the pitch rising. I tried to pay for lunch, and it was declined in front of everyone. The waiter had to come back 3 times. It was humiliating. That must have been embarrassing, I said, unmoved. Embarrassing? She repeated, incredulous. You can't just do that. I need that card. For what? I asked. You told me you didn't need me constantly taking care of you. Remember? There was silence on the other end, followed by muffled voices. Then Haley returned, her voice sharper now. That's different. Is it? I asked. Seems pretty consistent to me. You excluded me from a trip I paid for, continued using my money without permission, and now you're upset the free ride stopped. She didn't answer immediately. Then came the threat. We've been talking, she said coldly. When we get back, Ethan and I are looking into care facilities. I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. Care facilities? I repeated. You're getting older, Dad, she said, her voice taking on a tone of rehearsed concern. You clearly can't manage your finances responsibly. Ethan says we should sell your house to fund the care you'll need. I stood completely still, gripping the edge of the counter as her words settled into my chest like wet cement. Sell my house. Institutionalize me. All because I finally set a boundary. You've thought this through, I said quietly. We're doing what's best for you, she insisted, as if her voice could smooth over the cruelty. Todd says it's for your own good. Ethan, I corrected. His name is Ethan. Whatever, she muttered. Are you going to fix the card or not? I paused for a long moment, letting the silence stretch. No, I said. What do you mean, no? She barked. I mean, no, I said again. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. Don't you dare hang up on me, she hissed, but I did. I ended the call and set the phone face down on the counter, my hands steady, my mind sharper than it had felt in years. I turned and looked around my kitchen, the oak cabinets I had built with my own hands, the linoleum I had installed the summer Haley turned 10, the kitchen table where I had once braided her hair while she colored in a princess book. I walked to my office and opened the drawer that contained every major financial paper from the last 10 years, each file labeled in thick black ink. There was again Maple Street, their house, or what they had claimed as their house, the one I'd bought when the bank wouldn't approve their loan, the one I'd paid taxes on, insured, and quietly maintained because I believed that giving Haley a secure home was my duty as a father. I pulled out the deed and stared at the name printed on it. My name, sole owner. They had never transferred it. They had always said they would, that they were just too busy or waiting for the right time. The right time had come and gone. I picked up the phone and called Caleb Romero, the real estate agent I trusted more than anyone else in the business. He'd sold me my own home nearly 2 decades ago, and he had always dealt with me straight. Caleb, it's Robert Ellis, I said. I need to sell a property. He didn't ask many questions, just confirmed the address, asked when I wanted a list, and told me he'd send the paperwork by that evening. I'll price it to move, he said. You want showings scheduled right away. They're out of the country, I said. The house is empty for the next few days. Let's move fast. Understood, Caleb replied. I hung up and immediately searched for local movers. I didn't want a big corporate company. I wanted someone discreet, efficient, respectful. That's when I found Mike's Movers. Small, family-owned, good reviews. I dialed the number, and a man named Mike answered directly. I told him I needed everything in the house packed and moved into storage within 48 hours. No problem, he said. Where are we taking it? Storage, I said. I'll book a unit. Just pack everything. You got it, sir, he said. I called a place I'd used once before when remodeling and reserved a large unit on Brady Street, paid the first month up front, and arranged for access first thing Friday morning. With everything in motion, I drove to the Maple Street property that afternoon. I still had my key. As I stepped inside, I looked around at the home I had quietly watched them build, fill, and claim as their own. The living room still smelled like cinnamon from some plug-in fragrance Haley liked. The dining table I had purchased as an anniversary gift was still there, covered in a lace runner and a bowl of wax fruit. I walked through each room and noted what would need special handling. The electronics in Ethan's gaming setup, the crystal stemware in the china cabinet, the endless racks of Haley's clothes. It struck me how little of it had been earned. Most of it had come from me, gifts, purchases, silent support in the form of credit transfers, and covered bills. And yet not a single photo on the wall included me. There were wedding pictures, vacation pictures, even a family Christmas photo with Ethan's parents and siblings, but not one with me. It wasn't oversight. It was erasure. I locked up and drove home, ready to wait for Friday. I spent the next day preparing a checklist for the movers and organizing important documents, deed, insurance, utility records, all neatly filed in the Maple Street folder. When Friday morning arrived, I was at the house before 8 a.m., coffee in hand, and dressed in work clothes. Mike arrived with 2 men in a large white truck. He was polite, professional, and didn't ask many questions, though his eyes read the situation quickly. Family house, he asked. Was I said. Not anymore. He nodded and handed me a clipboard. I walked them through the house, pointing out what needed special care and what could be boxed quickly. I made it clear everything goes. All of it. They got to work immediately. I stayed and helped where I could, boxing up books, folding linens, wrapping framed photos in bubble wrap. The younger guys packed up the kitchen and bedrooms, labeling boxes with sharp black markers. In one of the closets, I found a stack of thank you cards from Haley's baby shower, many of them addressed to people I didn't know. Mine wasn't among them. I tossed them into a box without comment. I didn't go there immediately. Instead, I drove to the end of the block and parked in a spot just out of view, the kind of tactical position I would have used when managing job sites years ago, back when I was the one in control, when no one dared to question my authority or worth. The sun was bright, but not unbearable, and I rolled the window halfway down to let in the breeze. My phone buzzed with a notification from Caleb. The Carters are moving in today, as scheduled. All paperwork finalized. That was the message. Short, professional, perfect. I sent him a quick thank you and leaned back in my seat, waiting. At 4:07 p.m., a taxi pulled up in front of the house. I saw Haley step out first, sunglasses perched on her head, face drawn tight from jet lag, and I assumed residual anger from our last phone call. Ethan followed her, dragging 2 large suitcases. They looked like a couple returning from a dream, still wrapped in the haze of European cafes and photo ops, completely unaware that reality was about to rearrange itself beneath their feet. As they approached the walkway, I saw Emma Carter step outside, holding a box labeled kitchen. Her husband Derek followed close behind with a toolbox. They both paused when they saw Haley and Ethan coming toward the house like they owned it. I got out of my car and started walking toward them, slow and measured, heart steady. Haley stopped mid-step, confusion written all over her face. Ethan's expression shifted from annoyance to something harder to read. Uncertainty maybe, or dread. "Excuse me," Ethan said loudly, addressing Emma. "What are you doing in our house?" Emma blinked, startled, and Derek stepped up beside her, protective but calm. "Your house," Derek said. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." "This is 412 Maple Street," Ethan said. "We live here." "Not anymore," I said, stepping into view. Haley's head snapped in my direction. Her jaw dropped open, eyes narrowing. "Dad," she hissed. "What's going on?" I walked up the path slowly, pulling an envelope from the inside of my jacket. "These are the new owners," I said, nodding toward Derek and Emma. "They closed on the house 2 days ago. Everything's legal and filed." Ethan's voice cracked. "You sold our house." "It was never your house," I said, handing him the envelope. "The deed was never transferred. You never followed through. It stayed in my name. So yes, I sold my property." Haley looked like she'd been slapped. "You can't do that. You don't have a right." "Actually," I said, calm as ever, "I do. The paperwork's all filed. Caleb Romero handled the sale." "Where's our stuff?" Ethan barked. I pointed to the envelope. "Unit 47B, Secure Storage, Brady Street. First month's rent is paid. Everything's labeled and packed." Haley took the envelope with shaking hands, opened it, and stared at the storage slip as if reading the words might somehow make them untrue. "You had no right," she repeated, but lacked the edge of certainty now. "I had every right," I said. "You were living in a home I paid for, paid taxes on, insured and maintained. You locked me out of your life, used my money for your vacation, and tried to decide my future without me. That ends now." Ethan took a step toward me, face flushed. "You blindsided us. We were going to pay you back." I raised an eyebrow. "When? You've said that for years. And yet, every time I helped you, it just became the new baseline. You didn't want help. You wanted a handout. You wanted the benefits of my support without the responsibility of gratitude." Haley's voice cracked. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That," I said, "is not my problem anymore." Emma and Derek stood silently to the side, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. Emma clutched the box in her arms while Derek kept a steady hand on her back. "We should call the police," Ethan muttered, but the threat sounded hollow. "Go ahead," I said. "They'll only confirm everything I've told you. The sale was legal. You were tenants at best. And I've evicted you permanently." Haley turned to the new homeowners, voice trembling. "I'm sorry about all this. We didn't know, You should probably leave, Derek said gently but firmly. This is our home now. Haley looked back at me, eyes wide, no longer filled with rage, but something else, panic. How could you do this to your own daughter? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just said the truth. How could you do what you did to your own father? I turned and walked back toward my car. Behind me, Ethan muttered something under his breath, and Haley called after me again, but I didn't turn around. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and let the low hum of classical music fill the cabin. The return address confirmed it. Civil court, Haley and Ethan Ellis listed as plaintiffs. I stood there holding it for a moment, the sunlight warming my back, the sprinkler hissing softly nearby, and I let out a long, tired breath. I didn't open it right away. I made myself a fresh cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and then carefully slit the envelope open with my pocket knife. The contents were exactly what I expected. A civil complaint accusing me of wrongful eviction, unlawful sale of their primary residence, emotional distress, and financial sabotage. I chuckled softly, not from amusement, but from the sheer absurdity of how far they were willing to go rather than admit the truth, that they had lived in a house they never owned, funded their lavish vacation with my credit card, and tried to control the man who had given them everything. I called my attorney, Harold Baines, an old friend and a no-nonsense man who had handled a few property disputes for me over the years. I explained the situation, sent him the documents, and waited for his reaction. They don't have a leg to stand on, he said. Let them throw their tantrum in court. You've got the deed, the bank records, the sale documents, everything. They'll lose. The process moved quickly. Harold filed a motion to dismiss, attaching the full deed history, evidence of sole ownership, screenshots of Haley's continued use of the emergency credit card, and the certified bill of sale for the property, all airtight. A court date was set within weeks. I kept to my routine, didn't let it shake me. I still took my walks, read the paper, made dinner for one without bitterness. The town, of course, had started to whisper. You can't do something like this in a place like ours without the word getting around. At the coffee shop, the hardware store, the post office, people gave me second looks, some curious, some skeptical. A few offered words of support without even being asked. Heard what happened with your daughter, one of the old-timers at the barber shop said. You did the right thing. They were bleeding you dry. But not everyone agreed. At the grocery store, a woman from Haley's PDA days looked at me like I had kicked a puppy. Families should stick together, she muttered just loud enough for me to hear. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I let them think what they wanted. I had spent enough years justifying myself to people who never listened. The day of the hearing, Harold met me at the courthouse steps. He wore his usual gray suit and calm demeanor, and he handed me a copy of the brief he planned to submit. This will be open and shut, he said. Inside the courtroom, Haley sat beside Ethan at the plaintiff's table, both dressed like they were attending a funeral. Haley refused to look at me, but Ethan smirked when our eyes met, as if he believed the outcome was already in their favor. The judge entered, a no-nonsense woman with decades on the bench, and within 10 minutes of opening statements, it was clear she wasn't buying any of their story. Harold laid out the facts clearly, calmly, methodically. The defendant is the sole legal owner of the Maple Street property, he stated. At no time was ownership transferred. The plaintiffs lived there rent-free at the generosity of the defendant. He had every right to sell his own property. This case is not about law. It is about entitlement. Haley's attorney tried to argue that there was an implied agreement that the house would eventually become theirs. The judge asked for documentation. There was none. Ethan tried to speak out of turn, muttering about how I had tricked them, and the judge banged her gavel. Silence, or you'll be removed from the court. The whole proceeding lasted under an hour. The judge ruled in my favor, citing clear legal precedent and full documentation. The plaintiffs were ordered to pay their own attorney's fees. No damages were awarded. No appeal was permitted. Case dismissed. As we left the courtroom, Haley brushed past me without a word. Her eyes were red, but not from sorrow, pure rage. Ethan followed her like a dog with its tail tucked, muttering something I didn't bother to decipher. Outside, Harold clapped me on the shoulder. "Congratulations," he said. "They got greedy. You stood your ground." I thanked him, shook his hand, and drove home with the windows down, letting the wind carry away the last remnants of what had once been a bond between father and daughter. A few days later, the local paper ran a small article, "Family Property Dispute Resolved." Local court confirmed sale of Maple Street home was legal and binding. It was 2 paragraphs long, buried in the community section, but it said everything that needed saying. The weeks following the court's dismissal passed with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Not the kind that makes you smile immediately, but the kind that lets you breathe slowly, deeply, without the weight of someone else's expectations sitting on your chest. Each morning, I would wake up, make my coffee, and sit on the back porch watching the light filter through the trees. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't planning how to accommodate someone else's needs. I wasn't thinking about covering Ethan's next car payment or whether Haley would need another transfer before rent was due or what I could do to stay useful enough to be invited to the table. That table was gone, and I was no longer begging for a seat. One afternoon, as I was passing the pet store I usually ignored, something made me stop. The windows were filled with handwritten signs and adoption flyers. In the center was a photo of a golden retriever with a note. Cooper, 3 years old. House trained. Needs a calm home. Loves car rides. I went inside, asked to meet him, and within 10 minutes, Cooper and I were sitting outside under the awning, his head resting against my knee like we'd been traveling together for years. He didn't ask me for anything except presents. He didn't care about my money, my past, or what I had failed to give anyone else. He just sat with me, and in that moment, I felt something click into place. I signed the adoption forms, paid the fee, and drove home with him riding shotgun, his tongue out the window, ears flapping in a breeze. That night, he slept beside my bed without stirring once, and I didn't wake up to thoughts of betrayal or disappointment. I woke up thinking about possibility. The idea came to me the next morning as I sipped my coffee and looked at the calendar, the same one that had once marked flights and family events. It was blank now, and for the first time, that emptiness didn't scare me. It inspired me. I began researching RVs, small ones, manageable, nothing too flashy but enough to hold me and Cooper comfortably. I read forums, watched reviews, and finally drove out to a dealership on the edge of town. A salesman named Rick walked me through the options, but I already knew what I wanted. A 25-foot Airstream, gently used, everything in working order, just enough room for a man who no longer had to apologize for taking up space. I traded in my second car, paid the difference from savings, and drove it off the lot with Cooper seated proudly in the passenger seat, as if he'd always belonged there. I spent a week preparing, stocking the cabinets, organizing the tools, packing my books, a few clothes, and one photo album I wasn't ready to leave behind. It held pictures of Haley as a little girl, before the sharp edges had formed, before entitlement crept in and clouded what used to be simple love. I didn't keep it to reminisce. I kept it to remember who I had been before I let people take pieces of me until I was hollow. On a Saturday morning, I walked through my house one final time. I left the thermostat set, the fridge emptied, the doors locked. I had arranged for a neighbor to collect my mail and check the place once a week. It wasn't abandonment. It was release. Cooper and I climbed into the RV, and with one last look at the home I had built, we rolled down the driveway. As we passed Maple Street, I saw Derek and Emma's children playing in the yard. Emma knelt by the flower beds, planting something bright, while Derek was assembling a swing set. The house looked alive in a way it never had before, not with Haley and Ethan. That house had finally become a home. As we drove onto the highway, a green road sign marked our first destination, Colorado, 500 miles. Cooper sat beside me, head out the window, tail wagging with excitement. I turned on a radio, found a station playing old blues, and let the music carry us forward. We stopped at a scenic overlook as the sun began to set, pulling off into a small campground nestled in the hills. I set up a lawn chair outside the RV, cracked open a cold bottle of water, and watched the sky shift from orange to purple to deep blue. Cooper curled up beside me, content, silent, steady. I had expected the road to feel lonely, but it didn't. It felt honest. Each mile we covered wasn't an escape. It was a reclamation. Every town we passed, every tree-lined back road we explored, it was all part of the long journey back to myself. I stopped caring who approved. I stopped measuring my worth against other people's happiness. I had given too much for too long to people who took and called it love. But now, love looked like a dog who followed me everywhere I went, a sky that stretched wide and forgiving, and a road that never asked me to explain why I was on it. The next morning, I woke early, made coffee on the tiny RV stove, and sat outside again as the world came alive with birdsong and the rustle of wind through trees. Cooper watched squirrels with mild interest, but never chased. He was content just to be. And maybe that's what I had been missing. Not family, not recognition, not repayment, but contentment. The kind that doesn't come from approval or proximity, but from peace with who you are when no one's watching. We kept moving, never in a rush. I planned nothing rigid, let the road guide me. National parks, small diners, roadside markets, all places that didn't care about my last name or my net worth. In one quiet town in Nebraska, a young couple asked about the RV, admiring it. We talked for an hour. They never asked if I had kids. They asked where I'd been and where I was going. That's the question I like now. Not who I had been to others, but who I had become for myself. At night, I would sometimes flip through that photo album and remember the little girl who once held my hand at the zoo, the teenager who cried in my arms after her first heartbreak, the young woman I walked down the aisle with tears in my eyes. And then I'd close the album, place it under the bed, and remind myself that I had done everything I could. I had loved her with my whole heart. I had shown up. I had provided. I had forgiven. And when the time came, I had let go. Not out of anger, but because freedom was overdue. As the RV rolled down the highway and the mountains loomed in the distance, I realized something I hadn't said out loud yet. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was finally living. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt free. The end. If this story struck something in you, if you felt the weight of loyalty, betrayal, and freedom the way I lived it, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that speak to the heart and hit where it hurts. I'd love to know, what part of the story moved you the most? Was it the moment I took back control, or the quiet drive out of town with Cooper by my side? And where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. This wasn't just a story. This was a life reclaimed.